The scent of damp earth and wild jasmine often lingers over the Guanzhong plain long after the heat of the day has retreated. A heavy, sweet fragrance that seems to rise from the very soil of Shaanxi province. If you were to stand there, far from the neon pulse of modern Xi'an, you would feel a profound stillness settling over the landscape. The ground beneath your feet is not merely dirt and stone, but a layered record of 5,000 years of human ambition, a stratigraphy of fallen dynasties and forgotten names. Stratigraphy is simply the way archaeologists read the layers of the earth like pages in a book, each deeper level representing a more distant era of time. In the gathering gloom, the horizon begins to ripple with strange geometric shapes. They are not mountains, though they possess a mountain's mass. These are the earthen mounds of the ancient dead, hundreds of them, rising from the flat plains like the silent sentinels of a civilization that viewed the afterlife as a mirror of the world above. Some are soft and rounded by the erosion of centuries, while others maintain the sharp, sloping angles of true pyramids. As the light fades, the distinction between the natural world and the man-made world begins to blur, and it is here, in this liminal space, that the legend of the Great White Pyramid takes root. The city of Xi'an is a place of startling contrasts, where the high-speed rail glides past walls that have stood since the Ming dynasty, and where the glittering glass of skyscrapers reflects the shadows of tombs that have never been opened. For the modern traveller, it is easy to forget that this was once Chang'an, the city of eternal peace, the eastern terminus of the Silk Road and the largest city in the world. But beyond the city limits, the landscape turns inward. The farmers who till these fields have lived for generations atop a subterranean world of jade, bronze, and mercury. They walk over the resting places of emperors, their ploughs occasionally turning up a fragment of grey pottery or a rusted coin from a reign that ended 2 millennia ago. It is a place where the past is not a memory, but a physical presence, a weight that can be felt in the very air. As you settle in for the night and let the worries of the day drift away, you are joining us for another journey into the shadows of the past. Here at the Slumber Archives, we gather these fragments of lost history and weave them into stories to help you find rest. We share new narrations like this one every single day, exploring the mysteries that time has tried to erase. If you find comfort in these tales, please consider subscribing so you can join us every evening, and perhaps leave a like to help other weary travellers find their way to our fireside. Now let us return to the quiet plains of Shaanxi, where the mist is beginning to curl around the base of the forbidden mounds. The mystery of the White Pyramid began not with a shovel or a brush, but with a glimpse from the clouds. In the year 1945, as the Second World War drew to a close, a United States Army Air Corps pilot named James Gaussman was flying a mission between India and China. As he crossed the Qinling Mountains, a break in the clouds revealed a sight that seemed to defy the known history of the region. Below him sat a pyramid of staggering proportions, a structure that appeared to be made of shimmering white stone topped with a capstone of pure crystal or jade. He reported that it dwarfed the Great Pyramid of Giza, standing silent and majestic in a remote valley, far from any known settlement. It was a vision of a lost world, a monument that seemed to belong to a time before the dawn of recorded history. When Gaussman returned, his report was met with a mixture of fascination and deep skepticism. How could a structure of such magnitude remain hidden from the eyes of the world? 2 years later, another pilot named Maurice Sheehan snapped a photograph of a massive mound in the same region, which was published in the New York Times. The image showed a flat-topped pyramid, its sides remarkably symmetrical, rising out of the haze. For a brief moment, the world looked toward the Guanzhong plain with wonder, imagining a lost civilization that might rival the builders of Egypt or the Meyer. But then, the veil was drawn shut. The region became politically inaccessible, and the Great White Pyramid slipped back into the realm of myth, a ghost in the machinery of modern archaeology. We must ask ourselves what it means for a structure to be forbidden. In the case of the Shaanxi mounds, it is not necessarily a conspiracy of silence, but a gesture of profound, perhaps even fearful, respect. The Chinese government has long maintained a policy of non-intervention regarding many of these sites. They believe that the technology of the present is not yet sophisticated enough to preserve what lies within. To open a tomb is to expose it to the air, to the light, and to the decay of the modern world. They choose to wait, leaving the emperors to sleep in their cocoons of earth until a future generation possesses the wisdom to wake them safely. This creates a strange tension between what we can see from satellites and what we are permitted to touch. We can measure the shadows of these pyramids from space using infrared sensors to trace the outlines of buried walls and ceremonial pathways, yet the ground itself remains hallowed and untouched. The sheer scale of these structures speaks to a concept of deep time that is difficult for the modern mind to grasp. Some of these mounds are thought to date back to the Han Dynasty, 2,000 years ago, but others may be much older. There are those who whisper of a connection to the Younger Dryas, a period of abrupt climate change and cataclysm that occurred roughly 12,800 years ago. Scientists use this term to describe a sudden return to glacial conditions that may have wiped out earlier, more advanced cultures. If the foundations of the White Pyramid date back to such a distant epoch, it would rewrite the story of human progress. It would mean that while the rest of the world was emerging from the ice, a sophisticated society was already moving mountains of earth to honor their dead. As the twilight deepens over the plain, the modern world seems to dissolve. The hum of the distant highway fades, replaced by the rhythmic chirping of crickets and the soft sigh of the wind through the tall grass. You can almost imagine the thousands of workers who once swarmed over these slopes. The sound of wooden shovels, the rhythmic chanting of laborers, the smell of wood smoke from the campfires that illuminated the construction of an eternal home. They were not just building tombs, they were creating an artificial mountain range, a sacred geography that aligned the earth with the stars above. The pyramids were often oriented with mathematical precision to the cardinal points, echoing the celestial order in the dust of the Guanzhong plain. There is a specific kind of silence that exists in places where history is buried deep. It is a heavy silence, a silence that feels like a physical pressure against the ears. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the layers of history beneath you, the red clay of the Han, the grey silt of the Qin, and deeper still, the dark, rich loam of the Neolithic era. Each layer holds a secret, a bone hairpin, a broken chariot wheel, a seed from a fruit that no longer grows on this earth. The White Pyramid remains the greatest secret of all, a shimmering mirage that science can see but cannot reach. Is it truly a mountain of white stone, or is it a natural hill, sculpted by human hands and covered in the pale, alkaline soil of the region? Without the touch of a trowel or the analysis of radiocarbon dating, a method used to determine the age of organic materials by measuring the decay of carbon atoms, we are left only with the legend. And so, we stand on the edge of the forbidden, looking out over a landscape that refuses to give up its ghosts. The mounds are dark shapes now, indistinguishable from the hills, as the night fully claims the plain. The mystery of the White Pyramid does not require an answer tonight. It only requires our contemplation, a quiet acknowledgement that there are still places in this world where the past remains sovereign. The earth is a vast library, and we have only just begun to turn the first few pages. For now the tombs remain silent, the emperors remain undisturbed, and the Great White Pyramid continues to watch over the Guanzhong plain, a monument to the enduring power of the unknown. As the mist thickens and the stars begin to emerge, we leave the forbidden tombs behind, letting the weight of the ages carry us into a deep and dreamless rest. The scent of damp pine needles and cold mountain air clings to the memory of 1912, a year when the world still felt vast and the maps of the East were etched with empty spaces and whispered rumors. We find ourselves following the footsteps of Fred Meyer Schroder, an American trader whose journey through the rugged Qinling Mountains would eventually lead to one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. He was not an archaeologist, nor was he searching for lost civilizations. He was simply a man of business moving through a landscape that felt as though it had been carved out of a dream. Beside him walked a Buddhist monk, a quiet, steady presence whose knowledge of the terrain was not drawn from maps, but from the oral traditions of a monastery that had stood for 1,000 years. As they navigated the narrow, winding passes where the clouds seemed to tangle in the jagged peaks, the monk began to speak of giants, not of flesh and blood, but of earth and stone, hidden deep within the heart of the Shaanxi province. The journey was long and physically demanding, a slow crawl through a world of vertical greens and limestone greys, and yet there is a certain rhythm to such travel that lulls the mind into a state of quiet receptivity. Schroder wrote of the silence that permeates these high altitudes, a silence so profound that even the sound of a falling pebble feels like a transgression against the mountain's sleep. It was after days of trekking through this wilderness that the horizon finally opened up, revealing a sight that would haunt Schroder for the rest of his life. Emerging from the haze of the plains below were the outlines of structures that defied the natural geometry of the hills. They were pyramids, dozens of them, rising from the earth with a precision that seemed impossible for such a remote and forgotten corner of the world. But one among them stood apart from the rest, a colossus that seemed to capture the very light of the sky itself. Schroder described it as the Great White Pyramid, a structure so massive it made the surrounding hills look like mere ripples in the dirt. He estimated its height at nearly 1,000 feet, a figure that, if accurate, would make it nearly double the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer scale of such a monument. A mountain of white stone or perhaps plastered earth, its four sides perfectly aligned with the cardinal points of the compass, rising into the thin air like a beacon from a forgotten age. Schroder's journals reflect a sense of profound disorientation. He was looking at something that, according to the history books of his time, simply should not have existed. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, long considered the pinnacle of ancient engineering, stands at roughly 480 feet, a giant in its own right. Yet here, in the secluded heart of China, was a structure that could have looked down upon the wonders of the Nile with an air of ancient superiority. As Schroder and the monk drew closer, the details began to emerge through the shimmering heat of the valley. The edges were softened by time and the encroachment of hardy shrubs, yet the intentionality of the design remained unmistakable. This was not the work of nature. It was a deliberate, monumental effort of human will. Schroder turned to his companion, seeking some explanation for the sheer audacity of the landscape, and the monk's response was as chilling as it was simple. He explained that these pyramids were already ancient when his monastery's oldest records were written, records that stretched back 5,000 years. To the monk, these were not discoveries. They were part of the eternal furniture of the world, as much a part of the earth as the rivers and the stars. He spoke of them as the resting places of the old kings, rulers who had walked the earth when the world was young, and the gods still whispered to men in the cool of the evening. In the language of modern science, we might speak of stratigraphy, the study of rock layers to determine the passage of time, or radiocarbon dating, which measures the decay of carbon atoms to tell us how long ago a piece of wood or bone was part of a living thing. But in 1912, standing in the shadow of a 1,000-foot pyramid, Schroder had none of these tools. He only had his eyes and the weight of the monk's words. The idea that these structures predated the known dynasties of China suggests a timeline that stretches back into the Younger Dryas, a period of abrupt climate change and geological upheaval roughly 12,000 years ago. It is a time that mainstream archaeology often views as a void, a gap between the nomadic hunters of the Ice Age and the first flickers of settled civilization. Yet, if the monks' records were true, these pyramids suggest that a highly organized, technologically capable society was moving mountains of earth long before the first stone was laid at Stonehenge, or the first brick was baked in Mesopotamia. The scale of the Great White Pyramid implies a level of social organization that is difficult to comprehend. To build such a monument requires more than just a labor force. It requires a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, a stable food supply to support thousands of workers, and a central authority capable of planning a project that might take generations to complete. It suggests a world of deep time, a history that is not a straight line of progress, but a series of peaks and valleys, where great civilizations rise to impossible heights, only to be swallowed by the dust and the silence of the centuries. Schroder noted that the sides of the pyramids were often planted with trees and shrubs, a deliberate attempt by later generations to disguise them as natural hills. A camouflage of green that has worked remarkably well, keeping these structures hidden from the prying eyes of the West for hundreds of years. As we linger on the image of Schroder standing at the base of this white titan, the air feels heavy with the accumulation of millennia. We are reminded of the limits of our own knowledge, of how much of our story has been bleached away by the sun and buried by the wind. The Great White Pyramid remains a ghost in the annals of exploration, a fleeting glimpse of a past that refuses to be neatly categorized. It stands as a silent challenge to our understanding of human capability, a reminder that the earth is far older and far more mysterious than we often dare to imagine. The journey of Fred Meyer Schroder was just the beginning of a long and winding path toward understanding these forbidden tombs, a path that leads us deeper into the mist, where the line between myth and history begins to dissolve into the quiet dark of the Shaanxi plains. We move forward now, leaving the 1912 expedition behind, but the image of that white peak remains, a shimmering monument in the twilight of our collective memory, waiting for the day when the earth might finally decide to tell its secrets. The wind stirs the grass atop the mounds, and the stars continue their slow, indifferent dance above the peaks, while below the emperors sleep on, wrapped in the cold embrace of the ancient soil. The roar of a Pratt & Whitney engine is a lonely sound when you are suspended over the jagged spine of the Himalayas. In the spring of 1945, the world was a cacophony of steel and fire, but for a pilot named James Gaussman, the war had become a matter of navigation and endurance. He was flying a Douglas C-47 Skytrain, a rugged workhorse of the sky, tasked with ferrying supplies from India to Chongqing, across the treacherous air corridor known as the Hump. The air at 20,000 feet is thin and unforgiving, a place where the wind screams through the rivets of the cockpit and the horizon is a jagged line of ice and granite. On this particular day, a failure in the fuel system forced Gaussman to descend, banking his heavy craft away from the established route to find lower altitude and clearer air. He steered the Silverbird toward the valleys of the Shaanxi province, seeking a reprieve from the mountain turbulence, and as the clouds parted, he looked down upon a landscape that seemed to belong to another epoch entirely. Through the shimmering heat haze of the valley floor, Gaussman saw it, a structure so massive and so brilliant that it defied the logic of the military maps folded across his knees. It was a pyramid, but it was not the weathered, earthen brown of the mounds he had been briefed on. This was a colossal, gleaming monument of pure white, rising from the earth with a geometric precision that seemed almost alien against the organic curves of the surrounding hills. He later described it as looking like a giant jewel, a white translucent stone that captured the pale light of the high-altitude sun and reflected it back with a blinding intensity. As he banked the C-47, circling the structure in a slow, banking turn, he noticed something even more remarkable. The very apex of the pyramid was capped with a massive capstone, a piece of material that looked like polished jade or perhaps a crystalline substance that glowed with its own internal fire. The pilot was no mystic. He was a man of technical training, accustomed to the cold realities of aerial reconnaissance and logistics. Yet, as he hovered over that white peak, the sheer scale of the thing began to weigh on him. He estimated it was at least 1,000 feet high, nearly double the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It sat in the center of a vast, flat plain, isolated and silent, a ghost of a civilization that the modern world had seemingly forgotten to record. Gaussman reached for his camera, snapping a series of photographs through the cockpit window, the shutter clicking as the silver wings of his plane cast a fleeting shadow over the ancient limestone. He felt, in that moment, like an interloper, a creature of the machine age peering into a deep time that was never meant to be viewed from the air. When Gaussman eventually landed and submitted his report, the atmosphere in the debriefing room was one of quiet disbelief. The military intelligence officers listened to his account of the shimmering white giant, but their focus was on the immediate needs of the war effort, not the anomalies of ancient history. The photographs he had taken were handed over, tucked into a manila folder, and processed into the vast, grey machinery of the United States Army Air Force's archives, and then they vanished. In the years that followed the cessation of hostilities, the story of the Gaussman flyover began to circulate like a ghost story among aviators and historians. Where were the negatives? If a pilot had truly captured a 1,000-foot white pyramid on film, why was it not on the front page of every geographical journal in the West? Skeptics suggested that Gaussman had been a victim of the hump fever, a state of hypoxia and exhaustion that could cause vivid hallucinations in the thin mountain air. They argued that he had likely seen the Sun Yat-sen mausoleum, or perhaps one of the larger earthen mounds, its surface merely reflecting the sun in a way that tricked his tired eyes. But those who knew the geography of the Shaanxi province pointed out that the earthen tombs of the Han and Tang dynasties, while impressive, were covered in grass and scrub. They were hills of dirt, not monuments of white stone. To mistake a grassy mound for a shimmering, jewel-capped pyramid would require more than just a trick of the light. It would require a total collapse of visual reality. Gaussman maintained his story with the steady, unblinking gaze of a man who had seen something he couldn't explain but knew to be true. He spoke of the sharp edges of the stone, the way the light seemed to dance across the facets of the capstone, and the overwhelming sense of antiquity that radiated from the site. As the late 1940s bled into the 1950s, the mystery deepened. The archives of the military were searched and researched by independent investigators, but the Gaussman photographs remained elusive, lost in the labyrinth of declassified and mislabeled documents. It was as if the earth itself had reached up and pulled the evidence back into the soil. Some believe the photos were suppressed to avoid diplomatic tensions with the newly formed People's Republic of China, while others suggest they were simply a casualty of bureaucratic indifference, a few frames of film lost in a sea of millions. Yet the intrigue only grew. If the pyramid existed, it represented a challenge to the entire timeline of human construction. A stone structure of that size would require a level of engineering and a labor force that rivaled, or perhaps exceeded, the old kingdom of Egypt. It would mean that while the rest of the world was in its infancy, a sophisticated power was moving millions of tons of white stone across the Chinese plains to honor a king whose name has been erased from the official scrolls. We are left to wonder about the nature of the stone itself. Was it limestone, hauled from distant quarries, or perhaps a form of white ceramic or rammed earth treated with a forgotten technique to give it a marble-like finish? In archaeology, we often speak of stratigraphy, the layering of the earth that tells the story of time. The deeper we dig, the further back we go. But Gaussman had performed a kind of aerial stratigraphy, peeling back the veil of the present to glimpse a layer of the past that didn't fit the established narrative. His report hinted at a forbidden zone, a place where the authorities were reluctant to let foreign eyes wander. And so, the White Pyramid became a legend of the Cold War, a phantom monument that lived in the space between a pilot's memory and the silence of the archives. The skepticism remained, of course. Without the physical photographs, Gaussman's testimony was just words, a flickering candle in a dark room. But for those who study the limits of what we know, the story serves as a reminder that the map is not always the territory. Beneath the surface of our modern understanding, there are pockets of the unknown, anomalies that science, for all its tools of radiocarbon dating and satellite imagery, sometimes finds too heavy to lift. The earth is very good at hiding its giants. It covers them in dust, it grows forests over their flanks, and sometimes it hides them in plain sight, waiting for a lone pilot with a failing engine to look down at exactly the right moment before the clouds close again and the secret is returned to the keeping of the wind. Even now, decades later, the thought of that white peak shimmering in the 1945 sun haunts the edges of our history, a silent witness to an age we are only beginning to dream of. The ink on a printing press has a specific heavy scent, a metallic tang that carries the weight of the world's secrets into the hands of the waking public. In late March of 1947, that scent drifted through the streets of New York as the morning edition of the New York Times reached the doorsteps of a city still recovering from the exhaustion of war. The headline was not about politics or reconstruction, but something far more ethereal. It spoke of a mystery pyramid, a colossal structure of shimmering white stone tucked away in the rugged heart of the Shaanxi province. Colonel Maurice Sheehan, an executive for Trans World Airlines, had looked out of his cockpit window and seen something that defied the known maps of the East. He described a mountain of pale stone, a perfect geometric ghost rising out of the plains, topped by a capstone that seemed to catch the light of a different era altogether. As the story spread, the public imagination caught fire. There is a specific kind of hunger that develops when the world feels small and mapped, a longing for the blank spaces on the globe to suddenly reappear. For the readers of 1947, Sheehan's account was a promise that the age of discovery was not yet over. People began to speak in hushed tones of a lost civilization in the East, perhaps a culture that predated the known dynasties of China, or a branch of humanity that had mastered the earth long before the first stones were laid at Giza. The idea of a white pyramid, twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, suggested a scale of engineering that felt almost impossible, a testament to a deep time that we were only just beginning to perceive. The scientific community, however, reacted with a mixture of cautious curiosity and sharp skepticism. In the quiet halls of museums and universities, archaeologists leaned over their mahogany desks, peering at the grainy photographs that accompanied Sheehan's report. They spoke of stratigraphy, the study of rock and soil layers that tells the chronological story of our planet, and they wondered how such a massive footprint could have remained invisible to the formal record for so long. To the academic mind, an undocumented pyramid of that size was a disruption to the established timeline of human progress. If it truly existed, it meant that our understanding of early Asian architecture, and perhaps the very migration patterns of ancient peoples, was fundamentally incomplete. But even as the scholars debated the possibility of such a find, the window of opportunity began to creak shut. The geopolitical climate of the late 1940s was shifting like sand in a desert gale. China was a land in the midst of profound transformation, and as the internal fires of revolution grew, the borders began to harden. The region of Xi'an once a crossroads of the Silk Road where ideas and travelers flowed like water, was becoming a restricted zone. The openness that had allowed a commercial pilot to glance down at the secrets of the earth was being replaced by a veil of administrative silence. It is a strange irony of history that just as the world became aware of the mystery pyramid, the path to reach it was obscured by the shadows of modern conflict. Access to the Wei River Valley, where the giants were said to sleep, became a matter of permits and political clearance that few Westerners could obtain. The scientific community found itself in a state of suspended animation, wanting to apply the tools of their trade to measure the angles and test the mortar, but finding themselves held back by the invisible walls of a changing world. They spoke of the need for radiocarbon dating, a then new technique that measures the decay of carbon isotopes to tell us exactly when a piece of wood or grain was last alive, but there were no samples to be had. There were only the stories and the photographs and the lingering sense that something immense was being kept from the light. As the years passed, the sensation of 1947 began to fade from the front pages, settling into the specialized journals and the folders of those who refused to let a mystery go. The public moved on to the space race and the Cold War, yet the image of that white peak remained etched in the minds of a few. They wondered if the pyramid was still there, weathering the rains and the winds, or if it had been a trick of the light, a mirage born of high-altitude fatigue and the shimmering heat of the plains. Meanwhile, the earth itself continued its slow, patient work. In the absence of shovels and brushes, nature began to reclaim the sites that Sheehan had described. Trees grew taller on the slopes of the earthen mounds, their roots reaching down into the silence of the tombs, perhaps touching the very stones that the world was so eager to see. The forbidden nature of these tombs was not always a matter of decree, but a result of time and the shifting priorities of men. The science of the era was forced to wait, to stand at the edge of the border and look toward the horizon, knowing that beneath the soil of Xi'an lay a story that spanned thousands of years, waiting for a season when it could finally be told. And so, the White Pyramid transitioned from a news sensation into a whisper of the lost civilization lore. It became a symbol of the limits of our knowledge, a reminder that despite our satellites and our maps, the Earth is very good at keeping its own pace. The deep time of the Younger Dryas, that mysterious period of cooling and upheaval 12,000 years ago, seemed to echo in the silence of the Chinese plains. Was it possible that these structures were remnants of that era, or were they simply the grand monuments of a later empire, hidden by the accidents of geography and the whims of politics? The questions remained, hanging in the air like the dust of the Loess Plateau, as the world turned its gaze elsewhere, leaving the giants to their long, undisturbed sleep. If we could peel back the layers of the Laos soil, we might find that the earth itself has a memory, a silent record of the hands that shaped it over 2,000 years ago. While the legends of white stone and alien geometries flicker in the peripheral vision of history, the ground beneath the Shaanxi province offers a more grounded yet equally haunting reality. These are the Ling, the imperial burial mounds of the Western Han Dynasty. They are not made of the polished limestone of Giza, but of the very dust from which the Chinese civilization rose. To the casual observer, they may look like natural hills, softened by the wind and the slow creep of vegetation, but their symmetry betrays a deliberate, monumental intent. They are the anchors of an empire that sought to mirror the celestial order of the heavens upon the yellow earth. The architectural philosophy of the Western Han emperors was one of permanence through mass. They did not build with the fragility of wood or the cold distance of imported stone, but rather through a technique known as hang tu, or rammed earth. Imagine thousands of workers, their rhythmic movements echoing across the plains as they poured layer upon layer of fine, silty soil into wooden frames. Each layer, only a few inches thick, was pounded with heavy wooden rammers until it became as dense and hard as concrete. This was a slow, meditative process of creation, a literal compression of time and labor. The result was a structure that was not merely sitting on the land, but was a part of it, a man-made mountain that could withstand the tremors of the earth and the erosion of the centuries. When we look at these pyramids today, we are looking at the physical manifestation of millions of hours of human effort frozen in the density of the soil. As we move across the landscape, one silhouette rises with a particular gravity, demanding a deeper silence. This is the Maoling Mausoleum, the final resting place of Emperor Wu of Han. He was a ruler of immense ambition, a man who expanded the borders of his world and sought the secrets of immortality. His tomb is the largest of the Han mounds, a massive trapezoidal structure that once stood nearly 50 meters high. It is said that the construction of Maoling took over 50 years, beginning almost as soon as the emperor took the throne. It grew as he grew, a shadow following his life, waiting to receive him. The scale of it is difficult to grasp until you stand at its base, where the horizon is blotted out by a wall of earth that feels less like a building and more like a force of nature. Within these mounds, the philosophy of the afterlife was one of continuity. The emperors did not believe they were leaving the world, but rather moving into a subterranean version of it. The interiors of these pyramids are thought to be vast, vaulted palaces filled with everything a ruler might need to maintain his court in the deep silence of the afterlife. There are stories of rivers of mercury, of constellations mapped in pearls upon the ceilings, and of armies of terracotta guardians standing watch in the dark. But unlike the tombs of Egypt, which have been mapped and entered, the heart of Maoling remains a mystery. Science, for all its modern instruments and ground-penetrating radar, has yet to breach the inner sanctum. There is a profound hesitation, a cultural and political boundary, that prevents the spade from striking the core of the emperor's rest. One wonders what it feels like for the soil to hold such secrets for 21 centuries. The hangtu technique creates a seal so tight that oxygen is often excluded, preserving organic materials in a state of suspended animation. Deep beneath the surface, there may be silks that have not lost their color, and scrolls of lost history that have not yet turned to dust. The Maoling Mound is not just a tomb, it is a time capsule of the 2nd century before the Common Era, protected by millions of tons of compressed earth. It represents a moment in human history when the line between the gods and the state was blurred, and where the landscape itself was reshaped to provide a gateway to the eternal. As the wind whispers through the grasses that now cover the slopes of Maoling, the technical achievements of the Han engineers begin to blend with the mystical. How did they achieve such perfect alignment with the cardinal points? How did they manage the logistics of feeding and housing the tens of thousands of laborers required for such a feat, year after year, decade after decade? The archaeology of the Western Han is a study in the power of the collective, directed by a single focused will. Yet despite the clarity of the historical records, a sense of the unknown persists. The sheer volume of the earth moved, the precision of the slopes, and the silence of the hidden chambers suggest a level of sophistication that challenges our understanding of the ancient world. The Western Han emperors saw themselves as the center of a cosmic wheel, and their tombs were the hubs. Around Maoling, smaller satellite tombs were built for favored generals and consorts, creating a city of the dead that mirrored the capital of the living. This was a landscape designed to last for 10,000 years. And yet, there is something humbling about the way the earth eventually reclaims even the grandest monuments. The sharp edges of the pyramids have been softened by 2 millennia of rain. The white light that some early aviators claimed to see reflecting off the structures might have been the sun hitting the pale Loess soil during a dry spell, or perhaps it was a trick of the atmosphere, a ghost of the empire's former brilliance. We are left to contemplate the density of the Hangtu, the way the earth was beaten into a state of artificial stone. It is a reminder that the most enduring things are often the most simple. While the great cities of the Han have largely vanished, replaced by the sprawling modern metropolis of Xi'an, these mounds remain. They are silent witnesses to the passage of dynasties, the rise and fall of ideologies, and the slow turning of the seasons. They do not yield their secrets easily. They require a certain patience from those who study them, a willingness to accept that some things are meant to remain buried, protected, by the very weight of the world above them. As we look further into the construction of these sites, we see a bridge between the physical and the metaphysical. The choice of the Loess Plateau was not accidental. The soil was easy to carve and yet, when compressed, became an unbreakable vault. It was a partnership between the geology of China and the ambition of its rulers. The Maoling Mound, in its quiet, imposing presence, asks us to consider the nature of legacy. Is it found in the treasures hidden in the dark, or is it found in the way a culture remembers its ancestors? The Han emperors may have sought immortality through their tombs, and in a way they found it, not through the survival of their bodies, but through the enduring mystery of the mounds they left behind. The questions that science cannot yet touch are perhaps the most beautiful. We can measure the height of the Maoling Mound, we can analyze the composition of the rammed earth, and we can map the surrounding cemeteries. But the core, the actual experience of the emperor's final resting place, remains a realm of the imagination. It is a place where history ends and myth begins. In the stillness of the Shaanxi night, the forbidden nature of these tombs feels less like a political restriction and more like a sacred boundary. The giants are sleeping, and the earth, in its wisdom, has decided that for now, the silence is enough. The story of the Han origins is a story of how a people turned the soil of their home into a monument for the ages, creating a landscape that continues to haunt and inspire us long after the names of those who built it have faded into the whispers of the wind. To understand why these earthen mountains hold such a grip on the human imagination, we must look toward the man who first unified the warring states of China, a man whose name became synonymous with the very concept of an eternal empire. Long before the Han emperors built their terraced hills, there was Qin Shi Huang. He was a figure of absolute power who viewed the physical world not as a limitation, but as a canvas to be mastered, and eventually transcended. His obsession was not merely with the land he conquered, but with the time he felt he was owed. He sought the elixir of life, sending fleets into the eastern mists to find the mythical islands of the immortals, and when those fleets did not return, he turned his gaze downward, into the dark, fertile soil of Shaanxi. He began to build a palace for his afterlife that would not merely house his spirit, but would serve as a cosmic engine, a microcosm of the entire universe that he could rule forever, even after his breath had left his body. The construction of this tomb complex was an undertaking of such staggering proportions that it challenges our modern understanding of ancient logistics. Hundreds of thousands of workers labored for decades, moving mountains of earth and stone to create a structure that was never meant to be seen by living eyes. This was more than a grave. It was a symbolic layout of the cosmos, a blueprint of the heavens and the earth merged into a single, silent monument. The pyramid shape itself, which we see echoed in the later Han tombs, and the mysterious White Pyramid, reported by Western pilots, was not a mere architectural choice. It was a spiritual necessity. In early Chinese cosmology, the square base represented the earth, stable, four-cornered and enduring, while the rising slopes reached toward the heavens. By placing himself at the center of this geometric harmony, the emperor was positioning himself as the pivot of the universe, the bridge between the celestial and the terrestrial. As we descend in our minds into the depths of that unexcavated mound, we encounter legends that have persisted for over 2,000 years. The ancient historian Sima Qian wrote of a subterranean world that defies belief, a vast hall where the very geography of China was recreated in miniature. It is said that the great rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, and even the vast ocean itself, were represented by flowing veins of liquid mercury. Driven by mechanical devices, these silver rivers would pulse and flow through the darkness, shimmering in the eternal night of the tomb. To the ancients, mercury was not just a metal, it was a substance of profound alchemical significance, a liquid that mimicked the properties of water but possessed the weight of stone, a symbol of life force and immortality. Modern soil analysis around the mound has indeed revealed anomalously high levels of mercury, suggesting that these legendary rivers might be more than just a poetic fabrication. They may be a physical reality, still circulating in the gloom, guarding the secrets of a king who refused to die. Above these silver rivers, the ceiling of the burial chamber was said to be encrusted with pearls and precious stones, arranged with meticulous precision to mirror the constellations of the night sky. In the absolute silence of the tomb, the emperor would lie beneath a frozen heaven, a map of the stars that would never shift or fade with the passing of the seasons. This was the cosmic blueprint, a way to ensure that the order of the universe remained intact even as the world above fell into chaos. The tomb was a reflection of the Tianming, or the mandate of heaven, a belief that the ruler's authority was granted by the divine. By recreating the heavens within his tomb, Qin Shi Huang was claiming that mandate for all of eternity. He was not just a man buried in the ground, he was a celestial body, anchored in the center of a man-made galaxy. The scale of this vision is difficult to grasp. We often think of history in terms of linear progress, but when we look at the sophistication of this tomb complex, we see a level of symbolic and technical mastery that feels almost alien to the 3rd century before the Common Era. The pyramid was not just a pile of dirt. It was a highly engineered structure designed to withstand the weight of the ages and the curiosity of the living. And yet, despite our modern technology, despite our satellites and ground-penetrating radar, we have not dared to open the central chamber. There is a profound hesitation among archaeologists, a realization that some things, once disturbed, can never be restored. The tomb is protected by more than just the physical earth. It is protected by the fear of what we might lose if we touch it, and perhaps a lingering respect for the cosmic order the emperor tried so hard to preserve. As the years passed and the Qin dynasty gave way to the Han, this tradition of the pyramid tomb evolved, but its core spiritual significance remained. The shape continued to serve as a beacon between worlds. In the quiet hours of the night, when the wind howls across the plains of Xi'an, it is easy to imagine that these mounds are still functioning, that they are still pulsing with a slow, deep energy that we have forgotten how to measure. The White Pyramid, whether it is a trick of the light or a hidden monument of even greater antiquity, belongs to this same lineage of thought. It is the idea that the earth itself can be shaped into a vessel for the soul, a mountain that speaks to the stars. The silence of the Shaanxi tombs is a deliberate silence. It is the silence of a civilization that understood the power of the unseen. When we speak of forbidden tombs, we are not just talking about government restrictions or the dangers of mercury vapor. We are talking about a boundary between the known and the unknowable. The cosmic blueprint of Qin Shi Huang was a map of the soul's journey through the afterlife, a journey that was meant to be taken in private, away from the prying eyes of the future. The rivers of mercury continue their slow, heavy flow, and the pearl stars continue to shine in their dark sky, indifferent to the passage of 20 centuries. In this landscape, time feels different. It doesn't move in a straight line. It circles back on itself like the constellations on the tomb's ceiling. We find ourselves asking questions that science, with its focus on radiocarbon dating and stratigraphy, struggles to answer. What does it mean for a culture to invest so much of its wealth and spirit into a world that no one would ever see? Perhaps it was an act of ultimate faith, a belief that the physical world is merely a shadow of a much larger, more permanent reality. The pyramids of China, hidden beneath their blankets of grass and trees, are reminders of this faith. They are the anchors of a forgotten age, holding the earth steady as the centuries drift by like clouds over the Shaanxi plain. As we contemplate the weight of these earthen giants, we must also consider the cost of their creation. The thousands of lives spent in their construction, the secrets buried with the workers to ensure the tomb's location remained a mystery. It is a history written in shadow. But even in that shadow, there is a sense of awe. The emperor's dream of immortality may have failed in the physical sense, but in the creation of this cosmic microcosm, he achieved a different kind of permanence. He transformed the very landscape into a monument of his will, a silent testament to a time when men believed they could command the stars and turn the rivers into silver. The earth has a way of reclaiming what is hers, but these tombs resist. They sit on the horizon, neither fully part of the natural world nor fully part of the human world. They are something else entirely, a bridge, a blueprint, a mystery that science can touch only at the edges. And so we leave them to their silence beneath the vast arching sky of China, where the stars above and the stars of pearl below continue their eternal, silent dance. The sound of a shovel striking something hard beneath the parched earth of Shaanxi province was not the sound of a discovery, but the sound of a shattering illusion. It was a dry spring in 1974, and the local farmers were merely looking for water, digging a well to save their crops from the drought that had gripped the land. They expected to find a vein of life-sustaining moisture, but instead they unearthed a head of baked clay, its eyes wide and staring, as if surprised to see the light of the sun after 2,000 years of absolute darkness. They had no way of knowing that they had just brushed the cheek of a ghost, or that beneath their feet lay an army of thousands, standing in silent, disciplined ranks, waiting for an order that would never come. This accidental intrusion into the spirit world changed everything we thought we knew about the first emperor's final resting place. Before this moment, the great mound of the White Pyramid was a legend, a grassy hill that locals whispered about, but few dared to probe. But the discovery of the Terracotta Army, located nearly a mile to the east of the main tomb, revealed the true staggering scale of the funerary complex. It was not merely a grave. It was a subterranean city, a shadow empire that mirrored the one above. If this massive legion was merely an outpost, a guard detail stationed on the periphery of the emperor's eternal palace, one can only imagine the treasures and the terrors that remain sealed within the central mound itself. The sheer geography of the site suggests that the emperor intended to rule the afterlife with the same iron fist he used to forge a unified China, surrounding himself with a sprawling infrastructure of stone and clay that defies the rational limits of ancient logistics. As the archaeologists began the painstaking process of clearing away the silt of centuries, they found themselves being watched. Each soldier in this vast assembly is unique. There are no two faces that are exactly alike. Some have high cheekbones and thin, aristocratic moustaches, while others possess the rugged, weathered features of men born on the wind-swept frontiers of the north. Some look weary, their brows furrowed with the weight of invisible duties, while others wear a faint, enigmatic smile, as if they share a secret that the living have long since forgotten. To walk among them is to experience a strange kind of vertigo, a blurring of the line between the present and the deep past. You feel the weight of their gaze, a collective stare that has remained unchanged while dynasties rose and fell, while forests grew and withered, and while the very language of the land evolved into something they would no longer recognize. They are the silent sentinels of a forgotten age, and their presence serves as a haunting reminder that while we may study history, history is also watching us. The sophistication of their equipment is perhaps even more unsettling than their lifelike expressions. When the pits were first opened, the soldiers were found to be carrying actual weapons of bronze, swords, spears, and crossbows that were still sharp enough to draw blood. Analysis of these blades revealed a level of metallurgical mastery that seems out of place in the 3rd century before the Common Era. Many of the weapons were coated in a thin layer of chromium oxide, a chemical treatment designed to prevent corrosion. This is a technology that was not officially patented in the West until the early 20th century, yet here it was, applied with industrial precision to thousands of weapons destined to be buried forever. It suggests a civilization that had already mastered the secrets of the earth, possessing a scientific understanding of materials that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate through the lens of modern chemistry. Deep within the darkened pits, the archaeologists also recovered 2 magnificent bronze chariots, each cast with such intricate detail that they appear almost fluid, as if the metal were still cooling. These vessels were not mere decorations. They were functional masterpieces, complete with complex steering mechanisms and umbrellas that could be adjusted to shield the passenger from a sun that would never shine upon them. The bronze was painted in vibrant hues of crimson, azure, and gold, colors that have mostly faded into the grey of the earth upon exposure to the air. This loss of color is a tragedy of modern science. The moment the soldiers are touched by the atmosphere of our world, their ancient pigments begin to curl and flake away, vanishing like smoke. It is as if the tomb itself is a delicate organism, one that can only exist in the pressurized silence of its own vacuum, and our curiosity acts as a slow-acting poison. This reality is why the main pyramid remains unexcavated, a silent mountain of secrets that we are afraid to touch. If the peripheral pits contained an entire army, what lies within the inner sanctum? The ancient texts speak of a map of the world laid out on the floor of the central chamber, with the great rivers of China represented by flowing mercury, moved by mechanical devices to simulate the tides. They speak of a ceiling encrusted with pearls and precious stones, arranged to mimic the constellations of the night sky, so that the emperor could rest beneath a celestial canopy that would never dim. We have used ground-penetrating radar and remote sensing to peer through the layers of Earth, and these technologies have indeed detected high concentrations of mercury and the outlines of massive structures hidden deep within the mound. But for now, the tomb remains a forbidden zone, a place where the laws of archaeology hit a wall of preservation and perhaps a lingering ancient fear. The terracotta army represents a bridge between the known and the unknowable. They are physical evidence of a logistical feat that should have been impossible for a society of that era. The sheer volume of clay required, the kilns that must have burned day and night for years, and the thousands of artisans who labored to give each soldier a soul. It was a project of absolute obsession, driven by a man who feared death so much that he attempted to conquer it through sheer material force. As the years passed, the pits were eventually covered by the collapsing roofs of their timber galleries, and the world forgot they were there. The earth smoothed itself over, the grass grew back, and the farmers of Shaanxi began to plough the soil, unaware that they were walking over the heads of an empire. There is a profound stillness that settles over the site as the evening shadows lengthen across the pits. You can almost hear the rhythmic breathing of the thousands of clay lungs, a slow geological pulse that beats in time with the turning of the earth. We look at their faces, and we see ourselves, our own desire for permanence, our own fear of being forgotten, and our own attempts to build something that will outlast the flickering candle of a human life. The soldiers do not answer our questions. They simply stand, their hands frozen in the act of gripping long-vanished wooden shafts, their eyes fixed on a horizon that only they can see. They are the guardians of a threshold we are not yet ready to cross, reminders that some things are meant to stay buried, safely tucked away in the long, dark memory of the world. As we move further away from the excavated pits and back toward the looming shadow of the White Pyramid, the scale of the mystery only deepens. The army was just the beginning, a mere preamble to a story that is still being written in the dust. We are left to wonder if the first emperor achieved what he set out to do. Did he find a way to transcend the limits of time, or is he merely a prisoner of his own grand design, trapped in a palace of mercury and stone while the world he unified moves on without him? The wind that blows across the plains of Xi'an carries no answers, only the faint scent of dry earth and the echoes of a distant Iron Age. The sentinels remain at their posts, and the pyramid remains a silent, grassy mountain, holding its breath beneath the stars, waiting for a future that may never come to claim it. The silence of the Xi'an plains is not merely the absence of sound, but a heavy, deliberate choice made by those who stand guard over the past. We often imagine archaeology as an act of uncovering, a triumphant peeling back of the layers of time to reveal the treasures hidden beneath the silt and stone. But here, at the foot of the great earthen mounds, the discipline has transformed into something else entirely, a practice of profound restraint. It is a quiet acknowledgement that our modern hands, no matter how well-intentioned, carry the potential for destruction. The hesitation to enter the deepest chambers of the White Pyramid and its surrounding complexes is born from a series of heartbreaking lessons learned in the shadows of the 20th century. When the first pits of the terracotta army were opened, the world gasped at the sight of the warriors, yet few realized that those stone-faced soldiers were once vibrant with color. They wore robes of brilliant crimson, sky blue, and a specific, enigmatic shade known as Han purple, a complex synthetic pigment that speaks to an advanced understanding of chemistry in the 3rd century before the Common Era. But as the dry, oxygen-rich air of the modern world rushed into the tomb, a tragic transformation occurred. In less than 15 seconds, the moisture in the ancient lacquer began to curl and flake. Within minutes, the colors that had survived 2,000 years of darkness simply evaporated, leaving behind the gray, ghostly clay we see today. And so, the Chinese government has adopted a policy of protection first, excavation second, a philosophy that treats these tombs not as puzzles to be solved, but as fragile ecosystems of memory that must be left undisturbed until science can catch up to history. There is a deep, rhythmic patience in this approach. It suggests that the secrets of the first emperor and the mysterious white structures are not going anywhere. They have waited for millennia, and they can wait for many more. The authorities understand that once a seal is broken, it can never truly be mended. To open the main chamber of the pyramid today would be to risk the permanent loss of silk tapestries, bamboo scrolls, and perhaps even the legendary map of the empire with its flowing rivers of mercury. Currently, our vision is limited by the very earth that protects these sites. We rely on non-invasive technologies, tools like ground-penetrating radar and gravimetry, which measures minute differences in the Earth's gravitational pull to suggest where hollow spaces might lie. We use magnetometry to detect the subtle magnetic signatures of fired clay or metal deep beneath the surface. These methods provide us with a blurry, tantalizing skeletal view of what lies below. But they cannot show us the texture of the stone or the words written on the walls. We are like children, pressing our ears against a heavy wooden door, hearing the faint hum of a life we cannot see. The technology to peer through dozens of meters of packed earth and stone with high-resolution clarity, without moving a single grain of sand, does not yet exist in a way that satisfies the keepers of the tombs. There is also the matter of stratigraphy, the study of the layers of the earth, which archaeologists use to tell the story of a site over time. Each layer of sediment is like a page in a book, and once you dig through it, you have effectively torn that page out. Unless the record-keeping is perfect, the context is lost forever. In the case of the Xi'an pyramids, the stratigraphy is incredibly complex, involving layers of rammed earth that were engineered to be as hard as concrete. To penetrate these layers without destroying the subtle clues left by the original builders, the pollen counts, the microscopic traces of organic materials, the very breath of the ancient world, requires a level of precision that even our most advanced robotic probes cannot yet guarantee. Beyond the technical hurdles lies a more somber ethical landscape. In the West, we often view the past as a resource to be mined for knowledge, but in the heart of China, the relationship with the ancestors is far more intimate and enduring. These are not just archaeological specimens. They are the resting places of the architects of a civilization that still feels their influence today. There is a profound debate among scholars and the public alike regarding the morality of disturbing the eternal sleep of those who built the foundations of the nation. To many, the act of excavation is seen as a violation of a sacred trust, a disturbance of the feng shui, or the spiritual harmony of the landscape. The ancestors are seen as the roots of a great tree. To disturb the roots is to threaten the stability of the entire structure. This cultural reverence creates a natural barrier that science is slow to cross. It asks us to consider whether our curiosity is more important than the dignity of the deceased. Does the world truly have a right to see what was intended to be hidden forever? As the years pass, this question only grows more complex. We find ourselves in a period of waiting, a long historical twilight where we know exactly where the treasures are, yet we choose to leave them in the dark. Meanwhile, the earth continues its slow work of reclamation. Grass grows long over the slopes of the pyramids, and the roots of wild trees reach down into the soil, perhaps brushing against the stone ceilings of chambers we will never visit. The air within those tombs remains still, heavy with the scent of old dust and the metallic tang of ancient bronze. It is a pressurized environment, held in a delicate balance that has remained unchanged since the days when the stars were in a different alignment. The nitrogen levels, the humidity, and the lack of light have created a pocket of deep time, a bubble of the past that exists simultaneously with our frantic modern world. As we stand on the surface, looking out over the hazy horizon of Shaanxi province, we are forced to confront the limits of our own era. We live in an age that demands instant access and total transparency, yet the forbidden tombs of China offer neither. They stand as a silent rebuke to the idea that everything can be known, categorized, and displayed behind glass. They remind us that some things are perhaps meant to be lost, or at least kept in a state of perpetual mystery. The science of hesitation is, in many ways, the ultimate form of respect, a promise made by the living to the dead that their secrets are safe for another generation. And so, the White Pyramid remains a shadow on the satellite map, a green hill in the eyes of a passerby, and a profound question mark in the journals of historians. We wait for a breakthrough in subatomic imaging, or perhaps a new way of stabilizing organic matter that we haven't yet conceived. Until that day comes, the sentinels of Xi'an will continue to guard a palace of ghosts, wrapped in the protective embrace of the yellow earth, while the world above continues its restless spinning. The silence of the tomb is a long, measured breath, a pause in a conversation that began thousands of years ago and has not yet reached its end. In the cool, still air of the underground, the past is not a memory. It is a physical presence waiting for a future that is worthy of its revelation. The precision of a single line drawn across the dust of the Shaanxi plain carries with it a weight that transcends the simple act of surveying. It is a bridge between the terrestrial and the divine, a silent declaration that the earth is not merely a place of wandering, but a reflection of a higher celestial order. As we look upon the silhouettes of the mounds near Xi'an, we begin to see that they are not scattered by chance or convenience. They are fixed points in a vast geometric poem, written in the language of the cardinal directions. The builders of these earthen giants possessed a mastery of orientation that rivals the most celebrated monuments of the ancient world. Each side of the Great White Pyramid, and many of its surrounding companions, is aligned with startling accuracy to the true north, south, east, and west. This is not the magnetic north that causes a compass needle to quiver and drift over the centuries, but the true north, the fixed axis upon which the world itself turns. To achieve such a feat, the ancient surveyors had to look upward, bypassing the shifting landmarks of the valley to find their coordinates in the steady rotation of the stars. They used the shadow of a gnomon at high noon, or the rising and setting points of specific constellations, to anchor their monuments to the very fabric of the cosmos. In the stillness of the night, thousands of years ago, a priest or an architect likely stood upon this very ground, tracing the slow arc of the heavens and marking the earth with a certainty that remains unbroken to this day. As we ponder this alignment, we find ourselves drawn into the ancient Chinese philosophy of feng shui, a practice often misunderstood in the modern West as mere interior design, but which was, in its original form, a profound science of energy and placement. The ancients spoke of dragon veins, invisible currents of life force, or qi, that flow through the ridges and valleys of the earth like blood through a living body. The Shaanxi province was seen as a landscape of immense power, where the mountains and rivers converged to create a reservoir of spiritual potency. By placing the tombs of the emperors along these meridians, the builders believed they were plugging the central nervous system of the empire into the eternal vitality of the earth itself. The pyramids were not just markers of death, they were stabilizers, harmonic pins intended to keep the kingdom in balance with the natural world. There is a deep, rhythmic quality to this placement, a sense that the landscape is being tuned like a massive instrument. When one looks at a map of these sites, the distances between the mounds and their specific orientations suggest a deliberate pattern that extends far beyond the needs of simple burial. Some researchers have looked even higher for the blueprint of this arrangement, suggesting that the layout of the Xi'an pyramids mirrors the stars of the constellation Orion. This theory, which has famously been applied to the Giza plateau in Egypt, finds a haunting echo here in the east. The three central stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka, seem to find their terrestrial counterparts in the positioning of the largest mounds. If this correlation holds true, it suggests a shared human obsession with the belt of the hunter, a celestial clock that has guided civilizations across the globe, separated by oceans and mountains, yet united by the same upward gaze. The implications of such a connection are vast and quiet, inviting us to consider a time when the boundary between the sky and the soil was far more porous than it is today. To the ancient mind, the stars were not distant balls of burning gas, but the ancestors themselves, or perhaps the blueprint of a perfect city that had yet to be built on earth. By mirroring the heavens in the dust of Shaanxi, the emperors were ensuring their place in the cosmic hierarchy, creating a heaven on earth that would endure long after their physical bodies had returned to the clay. This celestial mapping required a level of mathematical sophistication that challenges our assumptions about the primitive past. Without the aid of optical lenses or digital sensors, they achieved a margin of error so slim it can barely be measured by modern satellite imagery. And so, we must ask how these ancient surveyors reached such a pinnacle of precision. Perhaps it was through the patient observation of generations, a slow accumulation of data passed from father to son, until the movements of the sun and stars were as familiar as the seasons of the harvest. They likely used simple tools, plumb bobs, sighting rods, and long lengths of treated cord, but they used them with a clarity of purpose that we have perhaps lost in our era of instant gratification. There is a specific kind of genius in simplicity, a way of knowing the world through direct contact and unwavering attention. The dragon veins they tracked were not just myths to them, but a felt reality, a way of understanding the subtle pressures and releases of the land. They felt the breath of the mountains, and they knew exactly where the heart of the valley beat the strongest. As the wind brushes over the tall grass that now covers these slopes, it is easy to imagine the landscape as a giant circuit board, with the pyramids acting as capacitors, holding and directing the energy of the earth. The concept of ley lines, lines of geographical and spiritual significance that connect ancient sites, finds a powerful resonance here. While mainstream science often views these alignments as coincidental or the result of simple topographical choices, the sheer consistency of the Xi'an mounds suggests a more rigorous intent. They are part of a network, a grid of sanctity that turned the entire Shaanxi plain into a temple of the ages. The silence that hangs over these forbidden tombs is not an empty silence, but one filled with the resonance of this ancient geometry. We are walking through a landscape that was designed to be read like a book, though the language it is written in is one of shadow, light and stone. As the earth continues its slow journey through the void, these pyramids remain fixed, pointing toward the same stars that watched over their construction. They remind us that our ancestors did not see themselves as separate from the universe, but as an integral part of its unfolding. The precision of their work is a testament to a time when human ambition was measured not in years, but in eons, and when the burial of a king was an act of cosmic alignment. In the soft glow of the fading light, the mounds seem to settle deeper into the earth, their sharp edges softened by centuries of erosion and the persistent growth of the forest. Yet the underlying structure remains, a ghost of the original vision that demanded nothing less than perfection. The dragon veins still run beneath the soil, hidden from the eyes of the casual observer, but felt by those who linger long enough to sense the weight of the land. We are left to wonder what other secrets are encoded in this grand design, what other celestial events are marked by the shadows of these giants on the solstices and equinoxes. The past is a vast, uncharted territory, and the pyramids of Xi'an are the milestones that mark our way through the darkness. As we move forward, we carry with us the quiet realization that the ancients knew something about the world that we are only just beginning to remember, that the earth and the stars are two halves of a single, magnificent whole. The texture of memory is often as fragile as the dust that settles upon these ancient slopes, and perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in the enduring legend of the White Stone. James Gaussman, the pilot whose report first ignited the modern obsession with the Great White Pyramid, described something that defied the typical earthy palette of the Shaanxi plains. He spoke of a structure that was not merely large, but luminous, a monument encased in a material so bright it seemed to radiate its own light, topped by a capstone that glittered like a jewel under the high sun. This description has led many to wonder if we are looking at the remnants of a technology, or perhaps an aesthetic, that has since been scrubbed away by the relentless passage of time. Some researchers suggest that the pyramid was once sheathed in a metallic casing, or perhaps a layer of crystalline stone, polished to a mirror finish to reflect the celestial movements we have just explored. In the silence of the laboratory, geologists consider the possibility of white limestone, a material used by many ancient cultures to give their monuments a ghostly, ethereal glow. If such a casing existed, it would have served as a beacon, a terrestrial star visible for leagues across the flat river valleys. As the centuries turned into millennia, the harsh winds and seasonal rains would have worked their slow magic upon such a surface. Limestone is susceptible to the slow burn of acidity in rainwater, and over deep time, even the sturdiest stone can dissolve, leaving behind only the core of earth and rubble that we see today. Meanwhile, others propose a more humble but equally striking possibility, the use of white plaster or lime wash. In the ancient world, the application of a bright white coating was a common way to sanctify a structure, turning a mound of dirt into a shimmering temple of the gods. Yet as we examine the modern landscape through the cold, impartial eye of satellite imagery, a strange discrepancy emerges. The shimmering mountain, described by Gaussman and later by the trader Meyer Schroder, seems to have vanished, replaced by a series of flat-topped mounds covered in the dull greens and browns of hardy vegetation. This leads us to consider the deceptive nature of the earth itself. The appearance of these tombs is not static, it shifts with the turning of the seasons. During the dry months, the parched grasses can take on a pale, almost silvery hue when viewed from a certain angle in the cockpit of a plane. Conversely, in the height of summer, the lush growth hides the geometry of the slopes, softening the sharp edges of the past until they resemble nothing more than natural hills. There is a quiet tension between the eyewitness accounts and the digital data gathered from orbit. Satellites using multispectral imaging can peer through the canopy of trees and the layers of topsoil, seeking the chemical signatures of the stone beneath. While these scans have confirmed the massive scale of the foundations, they have yet to find definitive proof of a gleaming white shell. This absence of evidence, however, is not necessarily evidence of absence. In the field of archaeology, we often speak of taphonomy, the study of how things decay and become part of the fossil record. On a scale of thousands of years, a thin casing of stone could easily be stripped away by local populations for use in their own homes, or buried under meters of wind-blown loess, the fine yellow-grey silt that characterizes this region of China. Over the vast stretches of deep time, the landscape swallows its secrets. What was once a brilliant white beacon may now be resting inches beneath the tangled roots of a pomegranate tree, waiting for a shovel that may never be allowed to strike the earth. The mystery of the white stone forces us to confront the limits of our own perception. When we look at a satellite photograph, we are seeing a single moment in time, a frozen snapshot of a world that is constantly in flux. The pilots of the mid-20th century were seeing the pyramids under different atmospheric conditions, perhaps during a rare period of erosion that had briefly exposed the older, lighter layers of the structure. Or perhaps, as some suggest, the white appearance was an optical illusion caused by the way the sun hits the salt-crusted soil of the plains. And yet, the persistence of the story suggests something more. There is a weight to these accounts that feels grounded in a genuine encounter with the sublime. As the years pass, the discrepancy between the legend and the reality only deepens the sense of mystery. We are left to wonder if the White Pyramid is a physical place or a psychological one, a memory of a time when the works of man were designed to rival the brilliance of the stars. As we linger on this thought, we must also consider the role of the vegetation that now blankets these sites. In an effort to stabilize the mounds and perhaps to camouflage them from prying eyes, many of the tombs have been planted with rows of cypress and pine. These trees, while beautiful, act as a living veil. Their roots penetrate the ancient masonry, and their needles create a thick carpet that obscures the true color of the earth. The mounds become part of the forest, a deliberate blending of the man-made and the natural. This brings a certain peace to the landscape, but it also creates a barrier for the scientist. Every tree planted is a layer of complexity added to the stratigraphy, the study of the layers of the earth. To understand what lies beneath, one must look past the green, past the brown, and into the silent, white heart of the myth. The possibility remains that the white casing was not stone at all, but something far more ephemeral. Some ancient traditions speak of spirit walls or coverings made of crushed shells and white clay, materials that would shimmer in the moonlight but wash away after a few centuries of neglect. This would explain why the early explorers saw something that modern cameras cannot find. They were witnessing the final, fading echoes of a grandeur that was already being reclaimed by the elements. It is a humbling thought that even the most massive monuments are subject to the same laws of decay as a fallen leaf or a passing cloud. The pyramids of Xi'an are not just tombs for emperors. They are tombs for the very ideas that birthed them. Every grain of white dust that blows off the mounds is a piece of history lost to the wind, a tiny fragment of a story that we are trying to piece together with our eyes closed. And so, we are left with the image of the pyramid as it might have been. A mountain of light, standing solitary in a sea of green. Whether it was encased in limestone, plated in metal, or simply painted with the dreams of a forgotten dynasty, its power remains undiminished. The discrepancy between what we see and what we remember is the space where the mystery lives. In that gap, we find the true essence of these forbidden tombs. They are not merely puzzles to be solved with radiocarbon dating or ground-penetrating radar. They are reminders of the vastness of human ambition and the even greater vastness of time. As the shadows lengthen over the Shaanxi province, the white stone remains a ghost in the machine of history, a shimmering possibility that continues to haunt our understanding of what the ancients were truly capable of achieving. We look to the satellites, and then we look to the stars, and in the silence between them, we feel the weight of the ages pressing down upon the earth. The white pyramid may be hidden, it may be eroded, or it may be a trick of the light, but in the mind's eye it still shines with a cold, unforgiving brilliance, a monument to a past that refuses to be fully known. In the quiet hum of a modern laboratory, the search for the ancient world no longer requires a shovel or a brush, but rather a steady hand on a mouse and a patient eye cast toward the heavens. While the early explorers hacked through undergrowth and braved the dust of the Shaanxi plains, we now possess the ability to peel back the skin of the earth from hundreds of miles above. It began with the public release of high-resolution satellite imagery, a digital window that allowed anyone with a connection to the world's data to scan the forbidden zones of central China. What appeared at first to be mere hills or weathered ridges soon began to reveal a startling geometric regularity. Using Google Earth as a primary lens, researchers and armchair archaeologists alike began to plot coordinates, marking 1, then 10, then 50, and eventually over 100 distinct pyramid structures scattered across the landscape like a fallen constellation. These are not the jagged, stone-faced monuments of Giza, but rather massive earthen mounds, often flat-topped and precisely oriented to the cardinal points of the compass. From the perspective of a satellite, the sheer scale of this funerary landscape becomes overwhelming. It is as if the very crust of the earth has been moulded into a silent, geometric language that can only be read from the stars. Along the winding path of the Wei River, these structures form a dense corridor of the dead, a vast valley of the kings that stretches for miles, hidden in plain sight amidst the sprawling expansion of modern agriculture and urban growth. As the technology evolved, so did our ability to see through the illusions of the surface. The introduction of LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, changed the nature of the hunt entirely. By pulsing laser light from an aircraft toward the ground and measuring the time it takes for the signal to return, scientists can create a three-dimensional map of the terrain that ignores the presence of trees, dense shrubs, and even modern buildings. This process, often referred to as digital deforestation, strips away the veil of the present to reveal the skeletal remains of the past. Under the digital gaze of LiDAR, the Shaanxi pyramids revealed secrets that the naked eye had missed for centuries. We began to see that these were not isolated monuments, but the centers of massive, complex funerary estates. The laser pulses mapped out hidden enclosures, vast rectangular walls that once surrounded the pyramids, separating the sacred ground from the mundane world. These walls, now eroded into little more than subtle undulations in the soil, suggest a level of organized labor and architectural planning that rivals any civilization in human history. Even more intriguing was the discovery of secondary burial pits, some of them hundreds of feet long, arranged in neat rows near the main structures. These pits, still sealed and silent under the weight of the lower soil, likely contain a wealth of artifacts, or perhaps the remains of those who served the emperors in life and were chosen to follow them into the dark. The satellite revelations have forced us to reconsider the timeline of this region. We see the way these structures align with one another, creating a network of monuments that seems to follow a grand celestial design. Some researchers suggest that the placement of the pyramids corresponds to the positions of certain stars as they appeared thousands of years ago, a silent testament to a culture that viewed the earth as a mirror of the heavens. This is the realm of deep time, where the boundaries between history and myth begin to blur, and the precision of modern sensors only serves to deepen the mystery of why such a massive undertaking was ever begun. As we scroll through the digital maps, we see how the modern world has grown around these ancient giants. Farmers plough their fields right up to the base of the mounds. Some have even carved homes into the sides of the smaller pyramids, living their lives in the literal shadow of the ancestors. From above, the green of the crops clashes with the dusty brown of the ancient earth, a reminder of the relentless march of time. Yet despite the encroachment of the present, the pyramids remain unmoved. They are anchors in the shifting sands of history, vast repositories of energy and memory that science is only just beginning to quantify. The data tells us that there are still hundreds of anomalies yet to be investigated. Some are buried deep beneath layers of sediment deposited by the flooding of the Wei River over the millennia. Others are hidden within the restricted military zones where the White Pyramid is said to reside. Each new satellite pass provides a slightly different angle, a different play of shadows that might reveal a staircase, a collapsed entrance, or the faint outline of a ceremonial causeway. We are essentially looking at a giant jigsaw puzzle where many of the pieces have been worn away by the wind, but the overall image is starting to take shape. A civilization of immense power, obsessed with the preservation of the soul and the geometry of the afterlife. We find ourselves wondering about the layers of stratigraphy, the chronological layers of soil and debris that have built up around these sites. Each inch of earth represents decades, perhaps centuries of silence. When we use LiDAR to look through the forest cover, we are essentially looking back through the Younger Dryas, the period of abrupt climate cooling that occurred over 12,000 years ago, and into the deep reaches of the Neolithic. While mainstream archaeology dates most of these mounds to the Han and Tang dynasties, the sheer scale and the sophisticated alignment of the largest structures continue to whisper of an older, more foundational influence. The technology does not provide all the answers, It only provides more sophisticated questions. It shows us the what and the where, but it remains silent on the who and the why. We can map the hidden enclosures and the secondary pits with millimeter precision, but we cannot hear the chants of the priests who consecrated the ground, nor can we feel the sweat of the thousands of laborers who hauled the earth in wicker baskets to build these artificial mountains. The satellites offer a cold, detached view of a world that was once vibrant and full of terror and wonder. Meanwhile, the agricultural changes of the last century have acted as both a shroud and a catalyst for discovery. In some areas, the leveling of land for irrigation has exposed the foundations of forgotten temples. In others, the planting of dense forests of prickly cypress and pomegranate trees, often encouraged by the government to prevent erosion and perhaps to obscure the true shape of the mounds, has created a natural barrier that only LiDAR can penetrate. It is a strange paradox. The more we attempt to hide or protect these sites, the more our technology finds ways to illuminate them. As the night sky clears over Shaanxi, the satellites continue their silent transit, their sensors drinking in the infrared heat and the reflected light of a world that refuses to stay buried. We see the vastness of the Valley of the Kings, a landscape transformed into a necropolis for the gods. The hidden enclosures speak of a time when the boundary between the living and the dead was a physical wall, a line that few were permitted to cross. And as we map the secondary burial pits, we are reminded that for every emperor who rests in a pyramid, there are thousands of nameless souls who rest with him, their stories woven into the very fabric of the soil. The revelations from above have turned the Shaanxi plains into a giant open book, though the language it is written in remains difficult to translate. It is a story of ambition that defies the limits of human life, a story written in earth and shadow. The more we see, the more we realize how little we truly understand about the motivations of those who came before us. They built for eternity, utilizing the geometry of the universe to ensure their place in the stars, and now, thousands of years later, we use those same stars, in the form of satellites, to find them once again. The cycle of discovery continues, a slow and measured dance between the ancient past and the digital future, leaving us to wonder what else lies hidden beneath the next layer of forest, or the next pass of the sensor, waiting for the light to finally break through the dark. The silence of the Shaanxi plains is not merely a product of the wind moving through the tall grass, but a deliberate, structured stillness maintained by the hands of the present. As we look upon these earthen giants from a distance, we must acknowledge that they do not exist in a vacuum of pure history. They are woven into the fabric of a modern, functioning state. In the quiet corridors of power, the decision was made long ago that some secrets are better kept under a veil of administrative caution. For the traveler or the curious researcher, the journey toward the White Pyramid often ends not at a stone threshold, but at a simple, unassuming sign or a locked gate. This is the reality of the restricted zones, where the ancient world meets the sharp edge of contemporary security. It is a strange irony of our time that the very places where the first emperors sought eternal peace are now neighbors to the machinery of modern defense. Several of these mounds, including those that fuel the most fevered legends, sit within the shadows of sensitive military installations. To the state, these are not just archaeological sites, they are strategic landscapes, and the preservation of the past is often secondary to the protection of the present. When a foreign film crew or an international team of archaeologists requests access, they are frequently met with a polite but firm denial, a wall of bureaucracy that is as difficult to scale as any mountain. This lack of transparency has created a vacuum, and as we know, a vacuum is rarely left empty for long. In the absence of clear, peer-reviewed data and open-access excavations, the human imagination begins to wander into the realms of the fantastic. Since the middle of the 20th century, the forbidden label has acted as a catalyst for 1,000 different theories, each more elaborate than the last. Some look at the precise geometry of the mounds, their alignment with the cardinal directions and the stars of the northern sky, and conclude that such perfection could not have been the work of human hands alone. They speak of extraterrestrial architects, of beings from the stars who descended to the Wei River Valley to leave behind markers of a galactic heritage. These stories tell of hidden chambers filled with crystalline technology and maps of star systems that should not have been known to the ancient world. While mainstream science looks for pottery shards and carbonized wood, the fringe looks for evidence of a cosmic connection fueled by the very secrecy that keeps the truth hidden. Yet if we peel back the layers of speculation, the reality of these forbidden zones is often more grounded and perhaps more melancholic than the tales of ancient astronauts. The true threat to these sites is not a lack of interest, but the relentless, slow-motion tide of human progress. As the city of Xi'an expands, the concrete fingers of urban sprawl reach out toward the sacred valley. High-speed rail lines now hum where once only the sound of ox carts could be heard, and the shimmering glass of new apartment complexes rises on the horizon, overlooking the tombs of kings who thought their solitude would last forever. The secrecy serves a dual purpose. It protects the state's interests, yes, but it also acts as a fragile barrier against the encroaching world. There is a profound tension in this landscape, a struggle between the need to modernize and the obligation to remember. In some areas, the mounds are being swallowed by the city. Farmers who once worked the land in the shadow of the pyramids now find their fields replaced by factories and paved roads. The forbidden status provides a strange kind of sanctuary. By keeping the public and the international community at bay, the authorities can manage the pace of discovery and the pace of destruction on their own terms. It is a slow, measured control of history, ensuring that the ground is only disturbed when the time is deemed right. Meanwhile, the mystery of the White Pyramid remains a ghost in the machine of modern archaeology. To some, it is a specific structure, perhaps the tomb of Emperor Gaozu, hidden under a layer of carefully planted trees to blend into the hills. To others, it is a symbol of everything we are not yet allowed to know. The restricted access for foreign researchers is often interpreted as a sign that there is something to hide, something that might challenge the established timeline of human civilization. We think of the Younger Dryas, that period of abrupt cooling nearly 13,000 years ago, that some believe wiped away an even earlier, more advanced culture. Could these mounds be older than the Han or the Qin? Could they be the foundations of a lost world, repurposed by the emperors of China to bolster their own divine right to rule? These are the questions that keep the fire of mystery burning in the heart of the forbidden zones. The science of stratigraphy, the study of soil layers to determine the passage of time, tells us that the earth does not lie, but it does require a witness to speak its truth. Without the ability to sink a spade into the earth or to run ground-penetrating radar across the summits of these mounds, we are left to observe from the periphery. We watch the satellite feeds and we study the grainy photographs from decades past, looking for a shimmer of white stone or a shape that doesn't belong. The secrecy creates a sense of deep time that is almost tangible, a feeling that we are standing on the edge of a great revelation that is being held back by the mere passage of human hours. As the years pass, the encroaching urban landscape brings a different kind of silence. The roar of construction and the bustle of millions of lives create a layer of noise that masks the quiet dignity of the tombs. In the restricted areas, however, the air remains still. There, the ancient heritage is preserved in a state of suspended animation, caught between the ancient dynasties and the digital age. It is a reminder that some things are not meant to be consumed by the modern world all at once. The forbidden nature of these sites, while frustrating to the seeker of knowledge, ensures that the mystery remains intact, for another generation. We find ourselves wondering if the secrecy is a form of reverence, a way of acknowledging that some places are too heavy with history to be opened to the light of common day. The emperors who lie beneath the earth sought to create a microcosm of the universe, a place where the laws of time were suspended. Perhaps, in their own way, the modern restrictions are fulfilling that ancient wish. By keeping the world at a distance, the mounds remain in a state of perpetual potential. They are everything and nothing, a blank canvas upon which we project our greatest fears and our highest hopes for the past. The reality of the forbidden zones is a tapestry of military necessity, cultural pride, and the quiet pressure of a growing population. It is a place where the satellite's eye meets the soldier's gaze, and where the farmer's plough is halted by the weight of an emperor's legacy. As we move forward into an era of even greater surveillance and technological reach, the pockets of the unknown become even more precious. The White Pyramid, whether it is a mountain of stone or a hill of earth, stands as a sentinel of that unknown. It reminds us that despite our maps and our sensors, there are still places on this earth where the shadows are deep and where the past is not yet ready to give up its ghosts. The encroaching sprawl of the 21st century may eventually lap at the very base of these monuments, but for now, the veil remains. We are left to look through the fence, to peer through the haze of the Shaanxi afternoon, and to imagine what lies beneath the roots of the trees. The forbidden label is not just a barrier, it is an invitation to wonder, a call to respect the slow pace of the earth's memory. In the measured dance between what is hidden and what is seen, we find the true essence of the pyramids, not as mere piles of earth, but as anchors of a history that is still being written, one quiet century at a time. The local farmers speak of these structures not as monuments of stone, but as living things, born from the very dust of the Shaanxi plain and nurtured by the hands of 1,000 generations. To the villagers who have tilled this soil for centuries, the great mounds are rarely called pyramids. They are referred to instead as the ancient hills, or more poetically, the sleeping mountains. There is a profound sense of continuity in this landscape, a feeling that the earth beneath one's fingernails is the same earth that was carried in wicker baskets 2,000 years ago to form these massive geometric peaks. The folklore of the region suggests that these are not merely tombs, but stabilizers of the world, anchors that pin the spirit of the land to the physical realm so that the harmony of the seasons remains unbroken. As the wind brushes through the tall grass, one might notice something peculiar about the silhouette of the White Pyramid and its smaller companions. Unlike the stark, naked stone of the Giza Plateau, these structures are often shrouded in a thick, deliberate mantle of green. For decades, it has been the practice to plant rows of cypress and pomegranate trees upon the slopes of the mounds. To the casual observer, or the satellite lens, this serves as a form of natural camouflage, softening the sharp, artificial angles of the pyramids until they blend seamlessly into the rolling horizon. This intentional greening creates a strange paradox, a monumental feat of engineering that is actively trying to return to the state of a wild hill. The trees act as a living veil, protecting the secrets of the clay and rammed earth from the prying eyes of the modern world, while their roots reach down like skeletal fingers to grip the history buried within. It is a slow, quiet concealment, a way of allowing the past to hide in plain sight, protected by the simple, unassuming dignity of a forest. The soil here carries a weight that is felt more than it is measured. Among the elders in the nearby hamlets, there are whispers of the spiritual cost of disturbing such ground. The concept of feng shui, or the flow of cosmic energy, is not a mere superstition in the shadow of the pyramids. It is the law of the land. It is believed that the emperors chose these specific coordinates because they sit upon the dragon veins of the earth, where the vital breath of the world is most concentrated. To break the skin of these mounds with a shovel or a drill is seen by many as an act of profound spiritual violence, an invitation for the balance of nature to shift in unpredictable and perhaps dangerous ways. Stories persist of those who attempted to pillage the lesser mounds in centuries past, only to be met with a sudden suffocating silence or a string of misfortunes that followed their families for generations. These are the curses of the soil, not the cinematic traps of a Hollywood tomb, but a deep cultural understanding that some things are meant to remain heavy, dark, and still. Meanwhile, life continues in the long, cooling shadows of these forbidden peaks. There is a beautiful, rhythmic irony in the way ancestor worship persists here. A farmer might pause in his work to light a small stick of incense at a modest family shrine, while just a few hundred yards away, the greatest rulers of the Han and Qin dynasties lie in state beneath millions of tons of earth. The scale is different, but the intent is identical. A bridge across the chasm of death, built with memory and ritual. The pyramids are not seen as cold museum pieces or archaeological problems to be solved. They are the elder kin of the community. On the days of the Qingming festival, when families gather to sweep the graves of their departed, the entire valley becomes a theatre of remembrance. The smoke from thousands of small fires rises into the air, mingling with the mist that clings to the tops of the burial mounds, creating a hazy union between the humble dead and the imperial giants. In this light, the forbidden nature of the tombs is not a political decree, but a communal agreement to let the ancestors sleep in peace. As the years passed and the modern world grew louder, the silence of the mounds only deepened. There is a specific kind of patience required to live alongside such mystery. One must accept that the stratigraphy, the layering of soil and time that archaeologists use to read the past, is also a ledger of what has been lost. We speak of the Younger Dryas, that sudden cold snap nearly 13,000 years ago that reshaped human history, and we wonder if the foundations of these mounds hold echoes of even older civilizations that the Shaanxi soil has swallowed whole. Perhaps the pyramids we see today are merely the latest iterations of a sacred geometry that has been practiced here since the dawn of the Holocene. The local legends seem to hint at this deep time, suggesting that the mountains were not built, but remembered into existence by the first kings. The continuity of this connection to the ground is what makes the Xi'an pyramids so distinct from their counterparts in Egypt or Central America. Elsewhere, the people who built the pyramids are often gone, replaced by new cultures with different gods. But here, the thread has never truly been cut. The same families have looked upon these same silhouettes for 2 millennia. They have seen the trees grow tall on the slopes, seen the white clay wash away in the summer rains, and seen the empires rise and fall while the mounds remained unmoved. This creates a protective barrier more effective than any barbed wire fence, a cultural shield born of the belief that the earth is not a resource to be mined for knowledge, but a sanctuary to be guarded. The science of archaeology, with its carbon dating and its infrared scans, often finds itself at a standstill when it meets this wall of living tradition. It is a clash between the desire to know and the duty to respect. And so, the White Pyramid remains a ghost in the landscape, a shimmering possibility that appears and disappears depending on the clarity of the air and the perspective of the viewer. To the scientist, it is a mound of rammed earth awaiting a radiocarbon date that may never come. To the local, it is a guardian of the valley, a silent grandfather made of soil and shadow. As the evening air begins to cool and the birds settle into the branches of the pomegranate trees growing on the ancient slopes, one can almost feel the pulse of the ground. It is a slow, heavy heartbeat, the rhythm of a history that does not feel the need to explain itself to the present. The pyramids do not demand to be understood. They only demand to be left in the dark, beneath the roots and the rain, where the legends of the soil can continue to grow undisturbed for another 1,000 years. If we were to pull back from the dust of the Shaanxi plains, rising higher and higher until the individual mounds of Xi'an become nothing more than geometric shadows on a vast tapestry, we might begin to see a pattern that transcends borders and languages. It is a peculiar thing, this recurring shape that haunts the dreams of our ancestors. From the golden sands of the Giza plateau to the humid, jungle-choked valleys of Mexico, and here, in the secluded heart of China, the pyramid rises as the ultimate expression of human ambition. It is as if a single, unspoken blueprint was whispered into the ears of different civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, yet all arriving at the same monumental conclusion. When we look at the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt, we see a structure designed with a mathematical precision that still baffles modern engineering. Its four sides are aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal points of the compass, much like the mounds of the Han and Qin emperors. But while the Egyptian pyramids were crystalline and sharp, clad in gleaming white limestone to reflect the sun like a fallen star, the Chinese pyramids were built of the earth itself. They used the technique of rammed earth, or hangtu, where layers of soil were pounded into a density that rivals stone. They did not wish to defy the landscape. They wished to become a permanent, sacred part of it. Across the Pacific, in the high basin of central Mexico, the city of Teotihuacan offers another haunting parallel. There, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon dominate a landscape that was once the largest urban center in the Americas. At first glance, the similarities are striking. Both the Chinese and the Mesoamerican builders utilized a stepped design, creating massive platforms that reached toward the clouds. They both understood the power of the meridian, aligning their structures with the stars and the movements of the celestial bodies. Yet, the heartbeat of these places was fundamentally different. In Teotihuacan, the pyramids were vibrant, public stages. They were sacrificial platforms, painted in brilliant reds and ochres, where the living met the divine in bloody, public spectacles. They were the centers of a bustling, cosmopolitan life. But in Xi'an, the pyramids were built for the silence of the dead. They were not meant to be climbed by the living. They were meant to be sealed, forever protecting the subterranean palaces of the elite. One was a theater of the sky, the other was a fortress of the soil. One invited the gaze of the masses, while the other demanded a respectful, eternal distance. There is a profound mystery in this universal impulse to build toward the heavens. Why did these disparate cultures, with no known contact, all choose the pyramid as their vessel for the infinite? Some scholars suggest it is simply the most stable way to pile weight, a natural result of gravity and the limits of ancient materials. But to stand in the presence of these monuments is to feel that there is something more, a shared architectural language of the soul. The pyramid is a mountain made by human hands. It is a ladder, a physical manifestation of the desire to bridge the gap between our fleeting, earthly lives and the cold, unchanging brilliance of the stars. As we compare these sites, we are forced to confront the shared tragedy of their transformation. We see how civilizations of immense power and sophistication can simply fade. The builders of Teotihuacan abandoned their city long before the Aztecs ever found it, leaving behind a ghost town of stone that the later inhabitants believed was built by giants. The old kingdom of Egypt eventually fractured, its monuments looted and its secrets buried in the sand. And in China, the grand lineages that raised these mounds were eventually swept away by the turning of the dynastic wheel, leaving the tombs to be reclaimed by the wild grasses and the memories of the local farmers. This is the shared mystery of the deep past, the realization that even the most massive structures are fragile when measured against the scale of deep time. We use methods like radiocarbon dating to measure the age of organic remains, looking at the decay of carbon isotopes to tell us when a piece of wood was cut or a grain of rice was harvested. We use stratigraphy to study the layers of the earth, reading the soil like the pages of a book to see which civilization built upon the ruins of the last. But even with these tools, we are often just scratching the surface of a much older story. There is a concept in geology and fringe archaeology known as the Younger Dryas, a period of abrupt climate change and cataclysm that occurred roughly 12,000 years ago. While mainstream science views the pyramids of Giza and Xi'an as much younger creations, there are those who wonder if these sites were built upon even older foundations, echoes of a mother culture that was lost during that ancient upheaval. While the evidence for such a global precursor remains elusive, the similarities in geometry and astronomical alignment across the globe continue to fuel the imagination. They suggest a level of sophisticated knowledge, of mathematics, of the precession of the equinoxes, and of the true dimensions of the earth that seems to appear out of nowhere, fully formed. In the quiet of the Shaanxi night, the forbidden tombs of China feel less like isolated anomalies and more like chapters in a worldwide volume of human longing. Whether they were built to honor a god-king, to track the movements of Orion, or to anchor the spirit of a nation to its soil, they all speak to a time when humanity looked at the horizon and refused to be small. They remind us that our history is not a straight line of progress, but a series of peaks and valleys, a slow rhythmic breathing of empires that rise, touch the sky, and then settle back into the quiet embrace of the earth. Meanwhile, the wind continues to blow over the flattened tops of the Xi'an mounds, carrying with it the same scent of pine and turned earth that the original laborers would have known. They worked with a sense of permanence that we, in our modern world of glass and steel, can hardly conceive. They were building for 10,000 years. They were building for the end of time. And as we look at the pyramids of the world, we see that they have succeeded. They have survived the rise and fall of languages, the shifting of continents, and the forgetfulness of the human race. They remain as silent sentinels, watching over a world that has forgotten why they were built, but cannot help but be moved by their presence. The mystery of the White Pyramid and its many brothers across the globe is not just a puzzle for archaeologists to solve with their brushes and their carbon tests. It is a mirror held up to our own existence. It asks us what we will leave behind when our own era passes into the shadows of deep time. Will our monuments be as enduring, or will they crumble, leaving only the ancient, earthen mountains of our ancestors to tell the story of a species that once dared to reach for the heavens? As the years pass, and the rain continues to smooth the edges of the Xi'an mounds, the answer remains buried deep within the soil, waiting for a future that may never come to claim it. The silence that hangs over the valley of the Wei River is a heavy, ancient thing, a stillness that seems to have been woven into the very fabric of the landscape over thousands of rolling years. It is a quiet that does not feel empty, but rather full, saturated with the weight of uncounted lives and the heavy golden dust of an empire that saw itself as the center of the universe. There is a profound beauty in this lack of disturbance, a grace in the way the earth has reclaimed what was once built to defy it. While the rest of the world rushes toward a future of glass and silicon, of constant noise and frantic discovery, these mounds remain as islands of absolute repose. They are the anchors of history, holding fast against the currents of change, content to exist in a state of eternal, undisturbed sleep. As the wind moves across the plains, it creates a soft, rhythmic rustle through the tall grasses that now carpet the slopes of the great mounds. If you were to stand at the base of the largest of these structures, the one the world calls the White Pyramid, you would hear only this sound, the gentle sighing of the air as it brushes against the emerald and amber blades of grass. It is a sound that has remained unchanged since the days of the Han and the Qin, a natural music that requires no audience to be beautiful. There is a strange comfort in the thought that beneath this waving greenery, beneath the layers of packed earth and the intricate stratigraphy, the careful mapping of soil layers that tells the story of time, lie secrets that may never be brought into the harsh light of the modern day. Perhaps some mysteries are not meant to be solved by the measuring tape or the carbon dating lab. Perhaps some things are better left to the earth, kept safe within the dark, cool embrace of the soil, where the reach of the sun cannot wither them. The mystery of the White Pyramid persists not because we lack the tools to investigate it, but because we are beginning to understand the value of the unknown. In an age where every corner of the globe is mapped by satellites and every historical figure is analyzed to the point of exhaustion, these forbidden tombs offer us a rare gift, a horizon we cannot cross. They remind us that there are still places where the past is sovereign, where the emperors still hold court in the darkness, surrounded by their terracotta armies and their rivers of liquid mercury. The idea of the forbidden often carries a negative connotation, but here, in the quiet of Xi'an, it feels more like a form of sanctuary. It is a boundary that protects the dignity of the dead and the integrity of the myth. To open every door is to lose the wonder of what might be behind them. To dig every hole is to strip the landscape of its magic. As the seasons turn, the mounds continue their slow, imperceptible transformation. In the winter, they are dusted with a fine white frost that clings to the dead stalks of summer's growth, making them look like ghosts of the mountains they emulate. In the spring, they erupt in a vibrant, defiant green, a symbol of life continuing to pulse above the chambers of the long-departed. This cycle of growth and decay, of blooming and freezing, is the only clock that matters here. It is a clock that counts in centuries rather than seconds, a pace of life that aligns more closely with the deep time of the planet than the frantic ticking of our own short lives. The emperors who commissioned these monuments understood this. They did not build for their children or even their grandchildren. They built for the end of time itself. They sought to create a physical bridge between the fleeting moment of a human reign and the enduring permanence of the stars. And so, the White Pyramid remains a phantom of the plains, a legend that flickers at the edge of our collective vision. Whether it truly once shimmered with the brilliance of white stone as the early aviators claimed, or whether it was always a mountain of earth intended to blend into the horizon, matters less than the feeling it evokes. It is a monument to the human desire to be remembered, and simultaneously a monument to the inevitability of being forgotten. It sits at the intersection of history and folklore, a place where the facts of archaeology meet the dreams of the explorer. As the twilight of our own understanding deepens, we find that we don't need to see what lies inside to feel the power of what was built. The mystery is the monument. There is a certain peace in accepting that we may never know the full truth of these hills. We do not need to see the jade suits or the silk tapestries to know they are there. We do not need to walk the corridors of the underground palaces to feel the ambition of the men who dreamed them into existence. The air remains cool, the grass continues to sway, and the earth holds its breath, guarding its treasures with a patience that we can only hope to emulate. The White Pyramid, whether it is a literal structure of stone or a metaphorical peak of human achievement, stands as a silent sentinel over the passage of the ages. It is a reminder that even in our quest for knowledge, there is a sacredness in the silence and a profound wisdom in leaving the past to its eternal, peaceful sleep.